Alright, so with our first exterminator, well, exterminated, let's see where we can
Welcome
go
back
for.
to
Again, right,
welcome back
the guy's playing Shaar.
welcome back to Ratchet Act Zero.
More,
Um,
more like, actually, the temperature is below zero, Dibs.
okay, yeah, that's the one. That would be one thing that would make Bomberman Act Zero better. Have it set in ice. I mean, it looks more visually interesting than that gold factory they had.
I'm curious, do the makers of Bomberman these days ever reference Act Zero, or is
No.
Act Zero just absolutely
Well,
taboo?
two things. One, Hudson Soft doesn't exist anymore. It's been absorbed fully into Konami. And two, no.
Well, okay. In my defense, I did say the current makers. Like, I didn't say Hudson Soft. Like,
No, again, the
yeah.
modern Bomberman games just, quietly ignore that ever happened. It's not like they are having continuity anyway compared to the old games, but they are referential to past stuff that happens, but Act Zero is quietly forgotten, like, the odd family member that it is.
Fair enough. Speaking of Hudson Soft, did they ever get around to re-releasing the old Bonk games?
Not that I know.
I don't know.
Shame.
Well, I think that's up. Is that up to Konami now?
Yes.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, the most recent Hudson Soft game that was received a port was a GBA title, I think, like something like Mole Ninja or something, that got a console and PC release thanks to the being compatible with the CAX engine. But again, that's usually limited run games who just decides, which one is working, which not.
Well, then again, maybe it's just a matter of when he decides to do it, but I'm a bit surprised that Deadlocked has not yet gotten the what happened treatment yet.
Again, just because, man, as you just said, Man Muscle decides, which one is working, which not. Otherwise, again, with him covering the first live-action Tekken movies, he definitely should have talked more about what happened with the second.
Maybe it was a case where, at the time there wasn't much to be thought of with 2, but now more stuff has come out about behind the
Not
scenes.
a lot. He did the video not really long ago, I think less than a year. So.
Oh, okay, yeah. So how in detail was he in regards to them collectively?
Well, not much. Okay, Tony talked about the first movie. My point is that, by your logic, you should have spent not much time, talking about the sequel, prequel, whatever.
Okay. It sounded like you said he did like a collective video on the both of them. Okay, well, in that case, maybe he's collecting intel so he'll eventually do one on Kazuya's Revenge, or maybe he doesn't even know Kazuya's Revenge exists.
No, I did mention it towards the end of that video.
Okay. Anyway, ice level.
Yeah, thankfully the ice physics is relatively limited here. As you can see, with the first part is just getting the walker in order to get into the port. Again, there's something that I can see, it's the level progression. Each major planet makes you actually go through each step, but breaks it down into micro missions, so each mission does not escalate too long, which is honestly okay. It doesn't really save the game, and conversely what I'm about to say does not doom another one, but it's kind of the polar opposite of what happens in a game that we'll see 2 games from now, Secret Agent Clank, where in that case the missions go on for way too long for their own good. And not to say that the levels themselves are supposed to be bad, sure. There are a couple of genuine doubts, but as a general thought, the length in itself is the problem rather than, the actual structure of the missions of the game. But again, you'll be able to see in due time.
I've always found it an interesting oxymoron. Like, ideally, games are meant to be fun, so you would think arguably more to a game automatically means it's good, but nah, like everything, you have to also keep in matter the point of pace, essentially.
Well, yeah, it depends. There can be games that, structure their pace so it forces a tour de force to the player, on what you can do, like with checkpoint starvation, or having it be a roguelike, and as a result, each run has to be consistently potentially long,
I will say,
it really varies.
I will say one game changer lately has definitely been games moving away from the live system. Like, I will say the live system definitely did play into some fatigue, given how, obviously, when you lost all your lives, it was usually back to the start of a very long stage for you. Like,
Well,
now
that also depended, but again,
Yeah.
usually the reason why it has been more accepted is because usually, unfortunately not all the time, something else has been put, in its place as a level of punishment. Because at the end of the day, that's what is supposed to happen. You failed. You can't not just get away scot-free. And the problem is that instead a lot of games it just gives you like a instant, get back immediately on the spot, moment, and as a result, kind of trivialize difficulty because you can just brute force your way through.
I guess it is that old chestnut of what you prefer. Do you want a game that definitely challenges you to the nth degree but can try your patience? Or do you want the game that arguably does flow better for you, but as a result might feel like it's coddling you a little too
And
much?
again, and even then, it's also still a matter of subjectivity. Like look at Mario Odyssey, for
Yeah.
example. Taking away the life system, the trade-off was instead losing a couple of coins, every time you die. Sounds very balanced on paper, but at the end of the day, the coins are there just for you to actually purchase, extra moves that normally you don't really need for progressing. Or cosmetics, the outfit that you want. So it really is kind of a superfluous thing unless you genuinely care, enough about that aspect that you want to make every single thing count.
I definitely think Odyssey had the right idea with its 2 difficulty settings. I do find it a bit whack, though, that they kept the quest marker to what they deem to be the easier difficulty, since I don't know. I feel like there were some things they could have just let you tinker and toggle with, but I digress. So,
More of a
I
conquering
will
of
say,
the fort. Again, the
going
good
back
news
to
is
Deadlocked.
the good news is that your robot companions, again, I still cannot be bothered to remember their names, unfortunately. Can do a lot of your actions, and instead you can provide defense instead of having to do the opposite. Sure, it turns the moment into escort missions technically, but I will still take that because it's easier for me to handle things rather than having these 2 dorks having be the guys that defend me when I'm actually clearing a mechanism.
Given how a lot of game series has had a tendency to develop a new gimmick and then run with it, I'm pleasantly surprised, but definitely curious with what would have been if they had actually thought that these 2 robot guys were the hot stuff, and from now on it was going to be Ratchet and his robot crew instead of Ratchet and
Well,
Clank.
okay, again, well, no, that's not what happened. The titillating idea of introducing new companions that will help Ratchet and Clank during their adventures, was something that the team Insomniac did consider since the second game, with the introduction of Bug, the guy that I did mention when we talk about, going commando. So it's not too out of the ordinary, the idea that, they wanted to potentially expand the crew and everything. And again, some attempts have been made. A keyword, some, not all of them. The most recent obviously be the alternating, styles between Ratchet and Rivet in trying to Rift apart.
Well, the reason I bring this up is, again, I can see a relatively darker timeline wherein Clank is done away with. Okay. Let's say best case scenario, he at least still participates in the story like he is here, but now it's these 2 robots, which, okay, to give them credit, they do have some personality in, and hey, ideally could be developed on. But I could definitely see it being something that would have caused a massive schism in the fan base.
Well, the Future Saga,
which, to be fair,
example,
just about any big change
the
would
Future
do.
Saga revisits this concept. But by having the 2 robot companions instead being having a more established type of personality, so there is that.
Alright then.
If I recall correctly, I'm gonna do the extra missions off screen, I think. I don't remember. Oh no,
Like
hold on. More commercials.
Another commercial.
Kids across the galaxy know that wearing the right pajamas can give you superpowers.
I'm Gamatron. My eyes shoot.
No, if it's always these three kids, I kinda get the idea why Red Zone has a very bad way of, you know, establishing the target audience for the marketability for merchandise.
Yes, we all know little kids will be the ones watching the literal death games.
Well, that's the thing also, just those three.
Find the new Ace Hardlight merchandise. In fact, sales are down across the board except for fuzzy Lombax ears.
We sell those?
Yes, sir. They're an accessory for the Tiny Tots assault weapons kit.
Well, you've obviously made some sort of idiotic mistake.
Dude,
Level for disintegration.
shouldn't that be telling you a hint to try and pump up Ratchet as your main mascot?
Find out
Again,
what
Vox has kind of like his own idea in mind of how the network should work.
I mean, I get what they're trying to do. I've just always felt like Vox is making things way tougher for himself than he needs to.
Alright,
Then again,
okay, go on.
Then again, an out-of-touch executive who scoffs at the success of something that they themselves don't like.
Specifically, network Mongo. Alright, let's check the leaderboard. Yeah, we're progressing a bit more with Suppressed Kid Nova. Hydrogun Agent Zero still here, but yeah.
That plasma ray was my favorite.
Sorry, Dwibs. I don't know how to
He's
tell
in
you.
a better place now.
Well, place is, he's scattered all over the map. He got blown up.
Hmm.
'Cause I think that's what happened.
Alright, let's get back to Orxon. Yes, so one or two extra planets from the previous games do return, believe it or not. Well, it really means nothing in the grand scheme of things. Again, if anything, just raises more questions about how is Dread Zone keep getting away with this without the authorities managing to catch them.
Like, we know these are public areas. We've been to them.
The
in
Orxon
previous
is literally
games.
one of the main factory, you know, planets of the Blaargs. Again,
I'm
sure, the
wondering
Blaargs are
if-
gone by this point, but it's still in the public knowledge at the very least.
I'm wondering if Deadlocked was supposed to be a soft reboot of the series, and that's why they don't address some of these weird
Well,
continuity
okay,
hiccups.
maybe there was also the fact that, okay, I don't really think it was the case, but at least back on, you know, the PS2 era, you know, there was a level of formulaic, like over the word, you know, type of structure for a couple of games, not all of them, because again, some of the more important ones that I can think of, God of War, or even, you know, Jack and Daxter and July, did kept that instead. But I do wonder if instead this game wanted to take a bit of a piece of the pie of the average, you know, Western animation shows that were going on at the time, the one, you know, being on comedies, but then instead negative continuity that's kinda soft reset at the end of each game, kinda, sorta. Keep in mind, this is still a progression in the timeline, and at the end of the game, the post-credit scene serves to establish that yes, this is still indeed a sequel to, you know, Up Your Arsenal. You know. And again,
Of course.
elements of this were not even ignored by future games. You know, like I said.
This is why this is why I ask if it's meant to be a soft reboot. Soft reboots are ones that technically do still keep the old continuity, but are kind of so on more specific details, in a sense, to make it easier for a new audience to jump on while not entirely alienating the old audience in that regard. I do wonder if the idea of this more darker element was to have Ratchet and Clank looking into these more
Again,
skeevy cases.
There's also clearly the fact that we established the game was rushed, and that the multiplayer was the primary focus of this. So part of me also wonders if the story mode was just, at that point, just tacked on.
Both of those aspects would check out because, sadly, yeah, single-player modes were starting to become the secondary aspect to these sorts of games, and it being rushed would explain why they kind of had to reuse some areas. Like, not in the sense that they reused maps from 3 or any of the previous games. I don't think that was the case, but, you know, asset reusal could have been, you know...
Well, keep in mind, this game doesn't seem to actually be reusing any assets from the original trilogy. It's probably also one of the reasons why this port was even weirder, really coupled together by idle minds, because it did not have, you know, things to work on. So, at the very least, I will give it that. It doesn't seem to recycle anything from previous titles, so there is that. Even Ratchet's too edgy for you, you know, gen-based armor clearly has a more pointy and less round design than in the previous games, which is also serves to indicate the whole edginess bit, in this case, literally.
Definitely, but in the sense of, you know, one things they may have reused, maybe not the specific assets, but some of the worlds, if maybe they were pegged for time and couldn't
Even
think of...
this, the level design, no, this is still Orxon, but I can tell these are not really areas or elements from the first game. Again, it has the same thing of the third game, where it brings you to planet you visited, like, you know, Aridia. But only superficially they're still memorable, but otherwise they could be a different location. Sure, make an argument, planet is big, different locations, you know, you're just in another one of them, but there's still a minor level of iconography that you probably should respect.
In that case, my best guess is maybe they wanted to go, look guys, it's the same world,
also,
so same continuity.
The textures of the rails were constantly changing, my god. It's kinda like, okay, not applicable to the whole franchise because, what I'm about to say, because it was established to begin with about a case of really negative continuity. But it's kinda like how, specifically in the Mario and Luigi series, not the franchise as a whole or specific type of titles, the layout of the Mushroom Kingdom keeps changing. You know?
Yes,
again,
it does.
not for the franchise as a whole, because it's established that each type of games tend to be usually its own kind of thing, so obviously it has to be its own, you know, layout and everything. But for that RPG specific, you know, series, which has a couple of returning bits to the Mushroom Kingdom, and as a result, you know, there should be some familiarity with the location. They don't really do that. And again, it wouldn't even be the best excuse to just recycle the assets, but, you know, just doesn't happen, and as a result, hell, let's also put a series that doesn't have this kind of problem. Kingdom Hearts, both Agrava and Halloween Town, returning in 2, have a layout that is practically different, completely different from the first game, outside of, you know, the classic iconography from the original movies that need to take off, like, you know, the Extending Hill or the Cave of Wonders. But even so,
that is true.
The level layouts, sure. Thankfully, for example, 358 over 2 days did instead use the designs of the first game, you know, when presenting those worlds at the very least. Sure, it did some level of remixing in some capacity, but it kept consistent for the most part instead. Anyway, there you go. As you can see, what you're basically doing is to activate the level so that the fuel can converge. But as also shown by, again, the level presentation, the textures were clipping constantly. Also, this is one of those games where, like I said, the level of the weapon upgrading goes through the roof, like I said, but as a result, each leveling up feels significantly less powerful than in the previous games. So you're just scraping, hoping that the next level up will actually be significant enough to actually deal more damage. It's kind of like those. Like not looter shooter necessarily, but you know those are part of that. But those games that have extra perks that apply to weapons, that are like 4% extra to weapon penetration towards armor. Wow, which means wow, it means nothing. At the very least, again, because that's your entire goal of the game, you know, shooting everything and blowing shit up until they die. at the very least you're basically practically guaranteed that you're gonna level up your arsenal quickly enough. So it's probably also one of the reasons it was handled like this. Alright, next up now we're inside the refinery.
Also, quit scratching the record composer. We get it. You're cool and hip with the
It's
kids.
still David Bergeron.
How old was he when he made this?
I don't know. I can tell you that the scores that he did around the same time for the PSP spin-offs are genuinely much better. And again, I can confirm at this point what most people have said. They're probably the most memorable of the entire franchise, if you ask me. Also, the other good news is that you're, again, just playing the game normally is bound to get you at least a good chunk of the skill points that you need. Not necessarily to progress the game, because frankly you don't need those, but to unlock some of the skins. Again, it's the 100% completion that is more tedious.
It's not entirely like Crash 4, but God, it kind of does remind me
I can
of
tell
Crash
you,
4
until the
ways.
skill points for Secret Agent Clank, that's the Crash 4 level of tediousness, because it has the exact same problems. It forces you to replay levels constantly over and over to the point that you will feel nauseated at one point. They require very specific doing, and unlike Crash 4, you cannot even do everything in one sitting. So, it incentivizes you to replay things at least a couple of times. So again, I get it, it was done for the PSP, so it kind of makes sense that they would try to encourage replayability, but good lord, at least make it entertaining.
Oh, yeah.
Also,
like
check this out, if I want, I can target the mines that are actually, holding the audience, and let them float away in the sky. Bye!
Oh my, I'm guessing they all signed waivers.
Sorry, no refunds.
but yeah, no, I guess you're right. Yeah, no, it is kind of Crash 4 to a T. At least in that regard.
Crash 4 did structure these levels in a way that if you were insane, or like insane enough, you could theoretically get everything in one sitting, So if you had enough patience, virtue, and again, insanity. But no, not for that one. You'll be able to see eventually. And to be fair, again, the main quote-unquote levels do not last long enough to be too tedious. But the segments on their own instead can. So if it's something that like you have to play the entire level to actually properly get, you're gonna have a bad time. Again, thankfully, the people who actually made the trophy list for the PS4 and PS5 version of that mercilessly decided to cut off your workload by having you required to get only 20 out of the 60 plus skill points. So it's a much easier endure to actually get the platinum.
Right.
Can't see shit, but sure.
I always have found it funny when... Okay, one mistake a show or movie makes is sometimes making a spectator sport that the audience can't see for crap, so it kind of sucks as a spectator sport.
It's kind of like, well, again, it has some level of roots in reality, like with Formula 1, Alright, next up on Dread Zone.
Dreams come bigger than life. and passions run wild in the streets.
Is that Peter Cullen doing that trailer voice?
I don't know.
I'm not your baby.
Oh my god,
no.
Courtney
Psychotic
Gears!
killing machine dare to reach for the stars. This holiday season, Fox Entertainment brings you
Reach for the sky.
of one exterminator's
I'm
lives
gonna
to
reach all the
From
stuff.
low beginnings as a high school math
Also,
teacher.
yes.
But baby, I'm giving these kids the gift
Also,
of learning.
Atom
Pathetic.
plus
Get out of
Monkey
my sight.
equals
To
broccoli.
spectacular success
Oh, actually, no,
as
it's
a
explosion,
homicidal
okay.
sports
Oh,
superstar.
of course.
I thought it was.
Rich,
She's a
I thought that was a tree for a
gold
second.
digger.
I was always there for you.
Share the dream. Live
So
the
there you
legend.
go. Courtney Gears is a gold digger.
For Reactor, I kind of feel sorry, but he's the next guy we had to beat up. Almost. Again, he's still kind of a douchebag bully, and he willingly signed to these whole circles, you know, including with Ace Hardlight, so, you know. He's not, again,
You know-
bit tragic, but not sympathetic.
You know, I'm actually kind of surprised they didn't have Courtney Gears as like a surprise boss returning, since they even show her and even have her voice acted for in this game too. It's like
It's
have
just
her
for
be there
war
looking for
building.
revenge. Yeah, I guess.
Again, it's also cute the way you can customize your companion. You can clearly tell this was made for having variety in multiplayer.
Mm-hmm.
Alright, let's check the leaderboard again. Yeah, we're getting surprise Hydro Girl. Hopefully these two actually can make it out. Alright, now if I recall correctly, we need to deal with the gauntlet before actually reaching Reactor. Again, if there's one props that I can give, at the very least the voice actors for, well, in general for the entire game, but also for Dallas and Juanita, actually try to, you know, sell you up on the commentator aspect, you know, of their banter. Like I said, the only major problem is that Dallas is really unpleasant. Juanita is a bit of a, you know, of an attitude herself, you know. But Dallas, as it will become clear by the end of the game, is every single dated joke about an hostile work environment you can think of.
Which maybe that was them trying to be.
And trust me, again, if the entire point was that by the end they get like killed, you know, and especially Dallas, you know, gets a particularly comical, you know, death, I guess it would be one thing, part of the satire and everything, but you'll be able to see eventually what happens. Again,
I'll just say I'm
we're halfway
guessing-
through, technically, of the game, so...
Like, even knowing what's happening, I want to try and give them the benefit of the doubt and say they were trying to be satirical with it. The issue
well,
is
again,
just...
it's shit. Keep in mind, again, it was also the fact that at the time, the denunciation of a bad work environment, you know, and, you know, harassment of women of them was, if not non-existent, at the very least not as common as today.
God, was that them trying to get ahead of the curve?
I do wonder if it's a situation like when Family Guy did that Kevin Spacey joke and people thought it was Seth MacFarlane or the writers trying to tell us something. I don't know.
The stuff that goes on behind closed doors, especially in the world of Hollywood. Or any industry for that
Pretty
matter.
much. Again, as far as I know, Insomniac so far has avoided most of the more blunt, you know, this kind of revelation, but who knows, it might be entirely possible that at some point, you know, it did happen.
Like I've said about Deadlocked, I hesitate to call it worthy of the Ratchet name, but it's a title I am okay with counting amongst the ranks here. That being said, when I play it, I'm just doing it for like a good quick story run, you know, I don't go out of my way to really do it as a whole.
I mean, I
'cause-
can easily put it for myself in relation to the franchise the same way I view as Dark Souls 2, you know. It's a case of, it's nothing that I would play over the other games of a franchise, but, you know, if the Black Sheep is to be like this, I think it's more of a testament of the general quality of the rest of the franchise.
Yeah, that's pretty much how I would put it. Like, it could have been better, but shoot, if this is what's widely considered to be the series' worst, it's in good standing.
Again, people have contention about the PSP spin-offs, which again we will see properly for ourselves after this. But honestly, having replayed them recently, I'm like, no, they're still, again, it's presentation and performance obviously are a bit of a hindrance, but overall they still are, you know, a good valiant attempt of recreating the PS2 games just on a, you know, smaller capacity, which was the goal, you know, for that. And again, the only major problem is the sequel of Secret Agent Clank is the 100% completion, but otherwise, again, if you just play it for the story or enjoying the basic gameplay, you will probably still have fun. Also, if you pay attention, some of the alien that you fight here are hedgehog, like a guy that throw you wheels. Again, keep that in mind also for a future game, because it might be relatively important.
Of course. I'll admit, getting to listen to this music again, part of it is starting to grow on me. Maybe that's from the repetition, but it does sound nice and funky. Of course, that may be my 2000s nostalgia kicking in, because I recall a ton of 2000s tracks trying to, well, I guess there's no other way to put it, sound like the Matrix.
Uh-oh. Hi.
Ratchet, you look like a squirrel wrapped in tinfoil.
Dude, you know you're still skipping frame 2.
Taking you apart. Gonna give my fans their money's worth. And try not to go crying.
Let them malfunction.
Right? I want this to look good for the camera.
Bring it.
Alright, time to shut down the reactor. Again, boss fight is fair enough compared to how we needed to, you know, get back to shell shock constantly throughout the entirety of the planet where it was. This is much easier, and again, even the other two exterminators remaining, the bug guy, I forgot his name, and Ace Hardlight, will be equally easy. Again, I get the idea maybe they wanted to have a gimmick with each of them, depending on which planet you face them, but after the first one they were like, nah, let's just have Ratchet actually deal with them inside the proper red zone building.
This is gonna take a while, isn't it?
No, as you can see, the bar on the right, as you can see, it's already more than halfway full depleted. Again, compared to the main series, the rest of the main series, these bosses are not even too spongy, if I have to be honest. But at least we're also spared from that.
They're typically fine, you know, they might make a first try or two, but otherwise once
also, as you can see, one of my modifications that I put is to have a bouncer equivalent weapon, so as you can see, I get shit on.
And he is dead!
Yeah, it took me like 1 minute and a half, basically, as the result mentioned. And I get another Edge 2G for you armor, in this case blue. I think it's gonna show up properly in the next part, if not in this cut. No, there it is.
Boy, going through all the Spartan armors, aren't we, Ratchet?
Our point is still not that much up, but at least we're killing the exterminators quick enough. Also, Hydro Girl surpassed us again, goddamn. Anyway, tune in for the next part where we go to the planet that we just unlocked. See ya.
See ya.
Yeah.
Hey.